In a heated exchange that caught national attention, Senator Rand Paul confronted Vice President JD Vance, calling him disgraceful for defending America's actions. What followed surprised everyone. Vance's sharp response not only silenced Paul, but shifted the entire debate. It became clear why Vance remains one of the most influential figures under President Donald Trump's leadership. The Senate chamber was full. Cameras recorded, reporters took notes, and the nation watched closely. Vice President Vance had just defended a military strike on a Venezuelan vessel tied to drug cartels. 11 men were killed, individuals linked to fentanyl trafficking. Vance's message was direct. Removing cartel operatives who poison Americans is one of the most important uses of U.S. military power. Senator Rand Paul leaned forward, striking the desk with his fist. "Despicable!" he shouted, accusing Vance of ignoring international law and human rights. He said Vance celebrated executions without trial. Gasps spread through the room as Paul pressed on, warning that America's principles were built on justice, not killing suspects at sea. He called the vice president's actions a disgrace to the country. The tension was unmistakable. Paul, pacing with intensity, asked if Vance had ever read To Kill a Mockingbird, pointing to the dangers of punishing without trial. He accused Vance of arrogance, reminding the chamber of past military triumphs, winning independence, ending slavery, defeating Hitler, contrasting them with killing suspected traffickers from a small nation. Some senators nodded quietly, others shifted uneasily, while reporters worked rapidly. Paul declared that Vance should face impeachment for reckless decisions that endangered America. The moment appeared decisive. Paul paused, chest lifted in confidence, while cameras captured the room's reaction. But attention quickly returned to Vance, calm and steady, preparing to speak. He placed both hands on the desk, gathering himself as Paul leaned back with a satisfied grin. On social media, hashtags like Despicable Vance gained traction. Yet Vance's eyes focused on the cameras, addressing the nation. Senator Paul seems to oppose anything tied to President Trump, Vance began, measured but firm. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines while real Americans are dying every day from fentanyl. The chamber froze as Vance continued, pointing to the 100,000 overdose deaths last year. That's not theory. That's war. Narco-terrorists have declared it on us, and unlike you, Senator, I will not stand aside. I will fight. He shared the story of a mother in Ohio who lost her 19-year-old son to a single fentanyl-laced pill. Her plea to do something echoed in Vance's voice. Turning back to Paul, he asked, "And now you call me despicable for answering her plea? What's careless is pretending this crisis is anything less than a battlefield." The chamber grew heavy. Vance's tone sharpened. He accused Paul of preferring open borders and endless trials while drugs continued pouring into the country. He noted Kentucky's high overdose rates, directly challenging Paul's record. Reporters leaned forward as Vance went further, suggesting investigations should examine whether Paul's opposition benefited the very cartels harming his constituents. The chamber erupted with shouts and gasps. Paul's face paled as he struggled with his notes. "I won't apologize for defending this nation," Vance declared firmly. "I won't apologize for saving lives, and I won't apologize for calling out weakness." Paul appeared unsettled, his confidence gone. The vice president pressed further, questioning what Paul had done for Kentucky families burying their children while he debated philosophy online. Parents in the gallery wiped tears as veterans nodded in quiet agreement. Across the country, the confrontation spread quickly. Social media trended with hashtags like Vance for America and Rand Exposed. Families who had lost loved ones to fentanyl shared messages of support for Vance. In Kentucky, callers to radio shows expressed frustration with Paul, saying Vance spoke for them. Back in the chamber, Vance's closing words carried weight. "Every overdose death is a wound to America's soul. I will not let it continue. Not while I serve." The gallery rose in applause. His statement was more than a defense. It was a commitment. Paul attempted a reply, but his words faltered. Vance cut through. "This is about life and death, Senator. You chose the wrong side." Reporters captured Paul's trembling hands as Vance drove home the distinction. "You defend process. I defend people. That's the difference." The big chamber reacted with quiet recognition rather than cheers. Paul slumped back, visibly shaken, while Vance stood composed, his mission clear. What unfolded was more than a Senate debate. It was a moment where the public saw a leader speak with conviction against a crisis devastating families nationwide. Screens across America replayed the clash as President Trump was briefed at the White House. President Trump watched replays of Vice President Vance countering Senator Rand Paul, his expression calm and unwavering. Then, in remarks that energized the nation, Trump addressed reporters outside the White House. "JD Vance is a fighter," he said firmly. "He doesn't bend, he doesn't bow, and he stands up for the American people. That's why he's vice president, and that's why he represents the future." His statement spread rapidly across networks and social media, viewed as a symbolic passing of the torch. Rand Paul, however, stayed silent. His office issued no comment, and his social media accounts remained quiet. In politics, silence can be damaging, and the vacuum was filled by Vance's words echoing nationwide. Trump's endorsement not only boosted Vance's stature, but deepened Paul's political troubles. Across small towns, veterans' halls and VFW posts replayed the exchange on loop. Men who had served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam listened closely. One Marine veteran, voice-breaking, said, "He spoke for us. Finally, someone in Washington who puts America first." Applause filled the room, many with tears in their eyes. Letters from veterans groups poured into the vice president's office, declaring their support. Their voices carried weight, and their loyalty shifted firmly toward Vance. By evening, the nation had split clearly into two sides. Rand Paul's shrinking circle repeated arguments about procedure and international law. Meanwhile, families, workers, veterans, and ordinary citizens saw in Vance something different: straightforward honesty combined with resolve. In Ohio, at a candlelight vigil for fentanyl victims, mothers held framed photos of lost children. A local pastor replayed Vance's words. "Every casket lowered because of fentanyl is a wound on America's soul." The crowd wept openly. One mother whispered, "I felt like he was talking about my son." The emotional wave was unstoppable. What began as a Senate clash had become a national reckoning. The next morning, every news outlet led with the same footage. Rand Paul's faltering response followed by Vance's powerful rebuttal. Anchors struggled to appear neutral, but the storyline was clear. Paul had been weakened, while Vance had risen. CNN questioned the military strike, while Fox highlighted Vance's focus on overdose deaths. Online, Americans shared videos of themselves applauding or saluting Vance. One viral clip showed a father holding his late son's photograph. "Rand Paul doesn't understand our pain," he said through tears. "But JD Vance does." Paul's staff scrambled, booking him on late-night programs to defend his position. But his strained tone only reinforced the contrast. The debate was no longer just about a military action. It had become a test of who truly carried the nation's grief. At an Ohio town hall, a mother stepped forward, clutching a letter. Her voice shook as she described losing her 17-year-old son, Caleb, to a single fentanyl-laced pill. "When you said protecting our children is the best use of the military," she told Vance, "I felt like you were speaking for me." Vance walked down from the stage and embraced her as the room applauded. The moment spread widely online, portraying him not just as a policymaker, but as someone who understood people's pain. Rand Paul's accusations now rang hollow. Commentators who once dismissed Vance admitted he had struck a national chord. In Kentucky, Paul's home state, protests grew outside his office. Signs read, "America first, Rand last." On radio shows, callers demanded fighters, not excuses. Even in Washington, senators began acknowledging privately that Vance's stance reflected public sentiment. While Paul tried to recover, Vance stayed focused. "This isn't about politics," he told aides. "It's about saving lives." His words resonated. Vance was no longer viewed only as Trump's running mate. He was emerging as a leading voice for families devastated by fentanyl. Finally, Rand Paul broke his silence at a press conference. Reading from notes, his voice unsteady, he called Vance reckless and accused him of abandoning America's values. Reporters pressed him on Kentucky's overdose crisis and his dismissive Senate remarks. Paul's responses appeared weak, spreading quickly online as examples of a politician on the defensive. Meanwhile, Vance visited a rural Ohio church where photos of overdose victims lined a memorial wall. He placed a single white rose beneath it. Cameras captured the quiet gesture, contrasting him as a leader carrying people's grief, while Paul looked like a politician struggling to survive. By evening, the emotional tide had grown overwhelming. Parents and siblings of overdose victims filled the airwaves with stories of loss. Their testimonies cut through policy debates and exposed the human cost. One father held his late son's baseball glove on Fox News. "My boy should be alive today," he said. "JD Vance is the first leader who makes me feel like someone in Washington cares," Vance responded humbly, calling these families the backbone of America and pledging protection over excuses. His voice cracked slightly, making him appear more genuine to millions of viewers. The debate had moved beyond politics into humanity, and Paul struggled to keep pace. The next day in the Senate, Paul again tried to regain ground. "History will judge Vice President Vance harshly," he warned. Vance stood, his reply firm. "History will judge cowardice more harshly than courage. Kentucky's people are dying, and instead of fighting for them, you attack those who try. America sees it." The chamber stirred as Paul looked pale and shaken. In Kentucky, once Paul's stronghold, cracks appeared. At a town hall, a grieving sister challenged him directly. "You call JD Vance despicable, but my brother died from fentanyl. For the first time, I felt someone in Washington understood me, and it wasn't you." The audience applauded, her words leaving Paul visibly rattled. Headlines the next day reported growing backlash, and callers to radio shows declared they were finished with him. Back in Washington, Vance stood before reporters. "We are not at war with innocents," he said. "We are at war with cartels, murderers who profit from death. And I will never apologize for protecting American lives." Looking into the cameras, he added, "If you've buried a child because of fentanyl, know this: I am fighting for you." Reporters fell silent, visibly moved. The clip went viral under the caption, "The People's Vice President." That same evening, investigative reports revealed that Rand Paul had accepted donations from groups linked to open border policies. The revelations landed like a thunderclap, worsening his political crisis. While families in Kentucky mourned loved ones, Rand Paul was revealed to have accepted funds from groups tied to easing cartel operations. JD Vance didn't boast. Instead, he stated plainly, "The truth always comes out. Leaders must choose. Stand with the people or with those who profit from their pain. I know my choice." The country understood the contrast. Rand Paul's credibility collapsed, his career hanging by a thread, while JD Vance's rise appeared unstoppable. The moment was no longer about a debate, but about a shift in leadership. Paul left the Capitol under heavy security, cameras swarming him. Once celebrated, he now walked alone, shoulders lowered, eyes vacant. Reporters pressed him. "Senator, did you take money from border groups? Do you regret calling Vice President Vance despicable?" His only reply, no comment. That silence went viral. Outside the Senate, Gold Star mothers held signs declaring support for Vance. One called out as Paul's car pulled away, "Your words hurt us more than the cartels ever did." For the first time in years, Paul faced not just political criticism, but moral rejection from those he claimed to represent. Meanwhile, JD Vance attended a candlelight vigil at the National Mall for fentanyl victims. He stood quietly, head bowed, as families read names aloud. A young boy approached holding a photo of his sister, who had died at 16. His voice broke, and his father wept beside him. Vance knelt, meeting the boy's eyes. "She will never be forgotten," he promised, hugging him as tears streamed down his own face. Cameras captured the moment, and by morning, the image spread across the country. It wasn't staged. It wasn't political. It was human. Americans felt it deeply. This was a leader sharing their pain. Paul tried to recover through a primetime interview. Sitting stiffly, he repeated rehearsed lines. "JD Vance is dangerous. We must respect international law." Midway, the host. "Cut in. Senator, a new poll shows 72% of Kentuckians back Vice President Vance. Even your longtime supporters are leaving. How do you respond?" Paul froze, unable to answer. His silence was replayed nationwide under the tag, "Rand's Surrender." Vance's counterstatement was brief. "This isn't politics. This is about saving lives. America first, always." The contrast was undeniable. Paul looked like a man sinking, while Vance stood firm as the figure Americans leaned on. Back in Kentucky, Paul sought support at home, but found anger. Protesters lined the streets with signs. "Rand betrayed us. Vance speaks for us." By a town hall, he tried to speak, but the crowd shouted him down. "Where were you when our kids were dying?" one demanded. A grieving father raised his son's jersey. "My boy is gone, and you defended cartels. You disgust me." The room erupted, not for Paul, but against him. That night, headlines read, "Rand booed in Kentucky." At the same time, JD Vance spoke live to millions. He wasn't polished, but his words carried weight. "I've met too many parents who buried children. They don't need excuses. They need someone willing to fight." Asked if that fight included military action, Vance answered firmly, "Yes. Every pill smuggled in could be someone's last breath. If that's not worth fighting for, what is?" Viewers responded with tears and overwhelming support. In that moment, he became more than Trump's vice president. He became a voice for grieving families. Paul attempted one last move, a press conference outside his Senate office. He accused Vance of making America a nation of executioners. Instead of backing him, reporters pressed harder. "Senator, why are overdose victims siding with Vance?" Cameras focused on Paul's trembling hands. I stand for law," he muttered. The clip trended with the hashtag, #YourRandResign. Meanwhile, Vance spent his time quietly meeting families. No speeches, no cameras, just handshakes, prayers, and comfort. The comparison was clear. Paul was unraveling. Vance was strengthening ties with the people. By dawn, polls confirmed the shift. Nationwide support for Vance soared, and in Kentucky, nearly 70% of Paul's own voters sided against him. In Lexington, families held candles outside a courthouse, chanting, "Vance fights for us." One mother said through tears, "My daughter died last year, and Rand called Vance despicable for protecting kids like her. That's not leadership, it's betrayal." Watching alone, Paul seemed defeated. His career wasn't ended by scandals or opponents. It was undone by a clash he thought he could control. Vance, meanwhile, filled his schedule not with donors, but with families, veterans, and everyday Americans. His verdict wasn't written in Senate records, but in the voices of those he embraced. That evening, Vice President Vance addressed the nation from the Capitol steps. Thousands gathered with candles, millions more tuned in. His words were calm yet firm. This is not a war we chose. Cartels poison our children, devastate families, and drain communities. To stand aside is not justice, it is surrender. And America does not surrender. The crowd erupted, but Vance raised his hand to quiet them. This is not about me. It is about every parent who buried a child, every community struggling to survive, every soldier ready to defend our future. Tears streamed as families listened. His message wasn't politics. It was hope. Rand Paul's downfall was complete, his legacy fading under the weight of one failed fight. JD Vance's influence, however, spread nationwide. Churches held vigils in his honor, veterans praised his resolve. Families lit candles with messages like, "For our son, thank you, JD Vance." In the end, history's pages didn't just record a clash between senators. They marked the rise of a leader who gave Americans something they thought was lost: hope. And now, if this story moved you, if it inspired you or gave you strength, don't leave without taking action. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that matter. And if you want to stand closer with us, join our membership for behind-the-scenes content and a community built on freedom, truth, and hope. Because together, with leaders like JD Vance, America will not fall.